This week's Parsha, we have the Avram coming to eulogize, to give a hesped for Sarah, and discussion is raised over there that the sequence of the posuk, that first the hesped and then the bechi, first the eulogy and then the crying, would seem to have been reversed, as normally one would have it. And there's a discussion about the Meshech Chochmah, the Netziv touches on it. I believe that when somebody is making a major contribution to the world, the first impression is that how it's affecting the global community. It's the hesped. We might add perhaps that the word hesped in and of itself is from the root form of the word tfus, which is a mold. Chazal, the Gemara in Shabbos says, "Kol hamorid dmos al odem kosher," that he's an apt, prepared, consistent, regular, somebody, a tzaddik, shemeter and mitzvahs. The Rebbeinu Shalom collects those tears and puts them in his warehouse, in his storehouse. Kosher is an interesting word. Kosher also means prepared. It means pure. It means somebody who is freed of failings, spiritual failing. But kosher means he's preparing that mold for the next generation. That's part of what it's about. Chazal learn from this Avram's negotiating with Ephron that the kicha that we learned, that just like he purchased the Moras HaMachpelah, that plot for the burial, special place that where there was a Meseres Odom, and Chava had been buried there, and he knew b'nevuah that this is the right place. Avram, he purchases it, and the act of the legal transaction, the Gemara connects to the act of kedushin, of betrothal, which later in the Parsha, in fact, is developed, that Avram sends Eliezer to take a wife for Yitzchak. So there seems to be a connection between the death of Sarah, the tzadekes, and somehow can't be accidental that we learn out the din of kedushin from there. Now the Ritva does say that it's not a conventional gzera shova, because there's a difference. It's the one case you're taking the money, you're taking the field; another place you're taking the woman. But it's comparable. The inyan, we learn out the concept. Conceptually, we learn out that the expediting of such a transaction for transference of ownership is connected one to the other. The act of kedushin, that he is now the Baal in the act of kedushin, has a certain bailus on dinei ishus, not on her as an eved, but on certain halachas that the Torah has given him a certain ownership, and in turn he has obligations to her. I'll call upon him. There seems to be a limud here. It can't be accidental that So question number one is, why would we learn out the dinim of kedushin from betrothal, taking a wife, from the dafke, from the purchase of a burial plot? Seems to be rather strange on the surface of things. The Tzlach asks in the Gemara in Brochus, where the Gemara cites that David HaMelech sang Shira, he composed the Tilim, Psalms, to different states of the human development, from an embryo to birth, all the way through, including the day of death. Asked the Tzlach, but we do have that the Rebbeinu Shalom prevented Klal Yisrael initially from singing Shira, and when the Mitzrim, when the Egyptians were drowning. So Chazal say, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, "Maaseh Yodai Tovim Bayam," my handiwork. These are creations of the Rebbeinu Shalom, these Egyptians, and it's tragic that it's not a moment to sing Shira. So how does David HaMelech sing Shira? In fact, we do see that afterwards, that Shibchu Gulam Aliyam, that they did say Shevach, they did sing Shira, but let's hold that for an abeyance for a moment. The Gon Yaakov on Gemara Bochas, where Rav Hamnuna Zuta was at a chasana, and he was asked to recite, to entertain the crowd and the attendees, and he said, "Vailonu de misonon, vailonu de misonon, woe unto us that we die, woe unto us that we die." Everything stopped. That was a showstopper. And then they said, "What do we do?" So he said, "We have mitzvahs, Torah mitzvahs, Megan protect us." But the Gon Yaakov wants to know, what was his initial intention when he said that what was he trying to do? He was trying to shock them. It was black humor. What was his motivation to say Vailon and the Misonon at a wedding? It seems to be, if in the continuity of the Gemara there, that they also broke an expensive utensil, an expensive vessel of glass, of beautiful, expensive glass. It seems to be that they were trying to traumatize the people, shock them out of degenerating into an abandon of wildness and irresponsibility, and because simcha can degenerate into such a situation. That would seem to be the simple pshat, but that's not what the Gon Yaakov says. The Gon Yaakov says that were it not for the fact that there was death in the world, there would not be a need for the new generation to come along and replace the old generation. If the old generation would stay on, there's no urgency for a new generation to come onto the field. They come onto the field because they have to replace the evacuation of the earlier Dor. I remember once discussing this Gemara with the Ramesh Kalbach, he should be stark and gesund, that should have Yeshuas or Refuas, Moshe ben Gittel. The Ramesh said, perhaps that's why people cry, especially women, at chasanas, because the chuppah is in itself at least an unconscious reminder of one's mortality. Perhaps then that is part of the interaction between purchasing of a kvura, purchasing of a burial plot, and learning out kedushin from this very sequence. Avram and Sarah miraculously have been reverted back to youthfulness. Yimon Baba Kama says that the matbeya, the coin of Avram and Yaakov, had a bachur and a psula, a young boy and a young girl, on one side of the coin, and the other side a zoken and a zkena, two elderly people, an elderly man and an elderly woman. Mefarshim discuss what is the matbeya, is also meloshen teva. So Maram Shik talks about the idea that each state of a human being's, the Medrash, in fact, brings on the posuk, Yodea Hashem Yemei Tmimim. The Rebbe knows the days of the perfect Tmimim, that they were perfect, symmetrical, consistent, that, as Chazal say, her young years, Sarah, and her older years were identical. So we understand it in terms of lack of sinning, just like the earlier years were void of sin, that so even the older years, the middle years and the later years. Maram Shik wants to point out that each stage of a person's life has specific advantages and energies. The young person has vigor, vitality, enthusiasm, and is easily inspired. The easily swayed, but easily inspired, negatively or positively. The elder years are less vigorous, physiologically, biologically. Somebody doesn't have that energy level physically, but normally, but there's more maturity, there's more of a cooling of the hormones, of the urgencies and the appetites that can sway a person and dissuade him. So the elder years have in it a great advantage of a certain objectivity, a certain wisdom that can come from life experience. Chazal say even an anju, kama bat kos, how many adventures passed over this elderly person. And for sure, Allah has kama v'kama, if somebody has accumulated a certain amount of learning and schusim, then that person in zikna in the elder years, has a certain longer view of reality. And a more focused, a clearer view, less static, that is interfering with the broadcast on the message, the theme of his primary theme of his existence as a servant, potential servant of the Rebbeinu Shalom. But it's a lack of excitement, enthusiasm, vigor, because the youth has gone. Says the Maram Shik, what the Gemara Baba Kama is teaching us is that the matbeya, the coin of Avram, had on one side the young couple, on the other side the elderly couple. He had both milas in Teva, that the Rebbeinu Shalom, just like there was a miracle that they returned to their youthful state biologically. They returned with a certain sense of vigor, but they didn't lose the upside, the advantage of the maturity, the sense of wisdom, the, the life experience, the Torah and Yerushalayim and Avas Shem that had been incorporated, absorbed into their personalities. So they had both the upside and the downside. Normally, it is in the nature of people that they're affected by everything they experience and everything they see. This idea that the early years, there's a certain passion and spiritual human energy there. Many quote it from the Baal Shem Tov that the beginning of Chassidus, the early stages of Chassidus, have in them a certain peak, a certain pitch of spiritual accumulation that fuels what will happen later. But it's a peak at the moment of inception. Schick and others refer that the earliest source that this is mentioned is in the Akedah, Rishon, just under 800 years ago. I'm sorry, the Rokeach, just under 800 years ago. The Rokeach brings this, that the Shoresh, the roots of Chasidus, he's talking about Chasidus as Ovdei Hashem, as it was 800 years ago, 780 years ago, the Rokeach, that the roots of that spiritual accumulation and potential is at the inception, is at the beginning. It's all there at the beginning. The Vilna Gaon in his Siddur on the Ishay Yisrael brings the idea that at the beginning of a spiritual odyssey, a journey, a avodah, the whole energy is there at the beginning. As such, the potential is there, and the Maram Shik wants to find it's all there, the resources. Perhaps we could compare it to like the Rashi teaches and the Chazal, Meforshim, that the initial creation of Yesh Me'ayin was just the first day, and then afterwards it was broken down into different facets and itemized according to the day, the hour, the particular aspect of creation. But the initial energy, the initial resource was there from the outset, and then from there it was Yesh Me'yesh. Similarly here, that at the outset, at the beginning of any kind of spiritual journey, any kind of spiritual reaching and achievements, it's there at the inception. The Maram Shik finds it in Tamu Kitov Hashem, that the Tamu, he says that sometimes somebody doesn't have an appetite. And Yiddish, they say, mitnessen kommt der Appetit. Sometimes somebody is urged, take a taste. And with the tasting, then the appetite is provoked, is engendered through the moment of tasting. Tamu, taste the Kitov Hashem. Ul-u. The Re'u, interestingly, again, the Maramshik compares it to the Pasuk in Tilim that Chazul, that to witness, to perceive the Mifalei Hashem will bring somebody closer. Seeing, being in an environment where there are others that are fulfilling the Dvar Hashem, witnessing, studying the Bria, as the Rambam says, that studying creation can, in and of itself, theoretically, bring one to a recognition of Niflos HaBeire and Avas Hashem. But, of course, without the directives, the Torah, the monitoring, the gauging, the inspiration of Yiras Shamayim and directing, the Avas Hashem doesn't achieve that. It can stall Chas v'Shalom along the way, which unfortunately, tragically, happens so often, even those who study the Niflos HaBari. But David HaMelech says Chazon, that perceive it, study it. Elementary psychology has it, and many secular, non-Jewish, lahavdil philosophers talk about the idea that our self-perception is shaped by how we perceive others perceive us as well. Famous lahavdil, the famous French philosopher Descartes talked about from his own consciousness is where he confirmed his awareness of his own existence. I think, therefore I am. But another French philosopher, many years later in the modern era, talked about, but how do I know a problem that many modern philosophers have dealt with? How do I know that others exist? Maybe it's all just solipsism. It's just a quirk of my mind, an illusion that I think there are others out there. Maybe it's just me dreaming, thinking. But Sartre added the idea of what he called the look, that just as I have a root intuitive sense of my own existence through my own consciousness, which I rely on and I verify and I am convinced of, similarly, I have the look of others in my environment, and I shape myself in relation to them, and them, I understand them as actually being. So a human being, even those starting from scratch, many come to a sense of the awareness of how psychologically we are, sociologically we are, in fact, shaped by the world around us and by those in the how we perceive, they perceive us, and it's inescapable. The Rambam says that the human being is man is a ish medina. He's a gregarious creature. He needs others. He's created in such a way that the animals don't need each other because they don't need utensils, but they don't need to go through so many stages and phases in order to get the bread on their table. They eat what's in the environment as the Rebbeinu Shalom has created them in a quick, simple interaction. The human being, as the Ksava Kabbalah describes it, we mentioned, Pru, Uvu, Umilu, so it's fill and complete it. It's incomplete. You're going to have to bring all of the stages of completion, to bring all of the issues that that need to be conquered. And since there are so many complex needs that a human being has, whether it's his food, which has to be cooked, or his clothing, or his shelter, I need others, because if I would spend all the time doing it, I would never get beyond only one area of expertise. And so the human beings need each other. On the other hand, human being is opinionated. He has his worldview. He has his perception. He's created uniquely. He's not just a particular detail, a particular manifestation of a species. He is a world unto itself. This theme is used in the Tona de Eliyahu and the Ovestar of Nosson, that the idea that a man is a mini world. And it's has it over again. The Malbim talks about it, the Gra talks about it, that it's not an idle metaphor analogy. A human being is, in fact, a world. But he has his particular unique contribution. As thematically, we frequently come back to this idea. That's why Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, each one made his contribution. Each one had a different approach. Same page, but different area of emphasis, of expression, and bringing to, quote Shemayim, another dimension. And so the human beings have to struggle through this kind of interaction, that they are constantly affected, there's a tinkering and a tweaking of their consciousness and their perception by what they perceive in the environment. On the other hand, there's some force that is within them that is at work to try and seek self-expression in the ideal way in which the Ribono Shel Olam endowed this particular neshama in its trip to the material universe. There's also another analogy there in the Gemara in Bava Kama. It says that the coin, the matbea of Yerushalayim, had David and Shlomo HaMelech on one side and Yerushalayim on the other. So again, that has to be understood. Why a coin? Perhaps that the coin and the coin of Avram and Sarah, that the youth and the lad and the young girl and the Zoken and the Zkena on the other side, and Shlomo and David and Shlomo, and on the other side the sense of Yerushalayim. Perhaps the difference, Chazal say, the brother of the Maharal teaches that after the Chazal were mispalel for the annihilation of the Yetzer Hara, the inclination, the evil inclination for Avodah Zarah, then it was the time that Nevuah went away. So we needed the Nevuah to be able to handle our Yetzer Hara. But the Maharal, brother of the Maharal, points out another. He said, where did it go? He has a premise. Yetzer Hashem, hopefully one day we'll talk about that. But he has a premise that he works from the axiom that if something is there in the Bria, it doesn't disappear. It goes from one place to another, but man can rearrange the resources of the Bria. He doesn't make, just like man is incapable of making yesh me'ayin, he can't make ayin me'yesh. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom can make yesh me'ayin and ayin me'yesh. And man can only make yesh me'yesh. He can transfer something that exists in one state to another state. We can go from solid to liquid to gas and back around again, but we can't make things disappear. So where did the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah go? Says the brother Nural, it went to money. That people have that became the substitute, the replacement to redirect that Yetzer Hara. Perhaps that's why that the matbeya of Yerushalayim was David and Shlomo. David in preparing through God the place of the Beis Mikdash and preparing Malchus for Yisrael, going to be the progenitor of Mashiach, coming from inauspicious kind of ruse from Moab. Yes, because improbabilities are the fair and the way Jewish history works. An Oka and an Akora, the Zokain and the Zkena, the people who were seemed to be incapable of propagating, becoming youthful, propagating again, having the milas, the virtues of youthfulness, and perhaps that's also the way we can answer the Tzlach when he asks how come David HaMelech sang Shira on the Yom HaMisa. The answer is there is a reason to sing Shira if it's human beings. The Malochim, the angels were prevented from singing Shira, but man can sing Shira because man, there's a lesson to learn that the urgency and the responsibility of fulfilling his mission statement, his shlichus in the world. I'll end with this. The Haftarah, Batsheva comes to Nasan Hanovi, and she says that David promised me that Shlomo would be the inheritor of the throne, and Adoniyahu is positioning himself, posturing, and making all kinds of public declarations. Now, Nasan Hanovi, at that point, L'chura, what he should do is send an email to David. Here's the problem, go correct it. But that's not what Nasan Hanovi does. Nasan tells Batsheva, you go, you start talking, I'll come in and I'll confirm, corroborate, validate what you're saying, that it's all true. Why in such a manner? So Rav Shach Zatzal explained that our responsibility is to find the manner, the language, the method of communicating what we have to communicate in the most impactful way. Why? Because human beings are psychological, sociological. They're impacted by what they see. Right? Chazu, right? See, mifalos. The chazu, mifalos Hashem. That's why a human being has to be so careful in the environment, in the world in which he situates himself, because he is invariably, inevitably absorbing from his environment what he is perceiving, even on peripheral vision. And that's why we live in a world today where so much is distorted, misrepresented. The media have attained to a governance because of mass communications, because of the high-tech world in which we live. There's a certain quick, superficial kind of an insidious insinuation into the unconscious and the consciousness of the person, aware, unaware, and have to be on guard. And so it becomes crucial to surround ourselves with an environment that is going to be more conducive, more productive, more probable that we're going to be able to attain to our personal, individual fulfillment. And Shem Yitain, that in the schus of the Rabbim, in the schus of the Yechidim, that we should see Yeshuas or Refuas for Kol Klal Yisrael, and a world that'll be spiritually, medically, totally healthy, and a reflection of Kvod Shemayim, Kol Tuv.